involving. Please remain standing and join in the singing of our national anthem, led by music professor Ron Burichter.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good afternoon and welcome to the University of Florida 2012 Spring Commencement. Today we celebrate the academic and personal achievements of our students who will receive their doctoral degrees from the University of Florida. I extend a special welcome to our distinguished platform guests. Our commencement speaker, Her Excellency Nirupama Rao, the Indian Ambassador to the United States, and representing the University of Florida's Board of Trustees from Miami, Juliet Rulak, from Naples, Alan Levine, from Freeport, Texas, Al Warrington, and from Gainesville, Faculty Senate Chair Scott Nygren and Student Government President Anthony Reynolds. Along with them are the Vice Presidents of the universities and the Deans of our college. Would you all please stand so that we can recognize and acknowledge you? I would like at this time for all the faculty present today to please stand so we can thank you for your commitment to the students and to this university. All the faculty, just stand and be recognized. This afternoon, the University of Florida is privileged to present honorary degrees to 3 deserving people of distinction. Other than the earned doctorate, the greatest recognition the University of Florida can give an individual is an honorary degree. The awarding of an honorary degree is in recognition of eminent achievement in scholarship or high distinction in public service, which exemplifies the purposes and ideals of the University of Florida. First, we are pleased to recognize a true medical scientist. I ask Provost Joe Glover to present William Evans for conferral of the honorary degree, Doctor of Science.
Thank you, President Machen. Childhood leukemia is the most common childhood cancer, and it was once considered a death sentence. Today, most children with this diagnosis are cured. We owe this progress to the work of several scientists, prominent among them Dr. William E. Evans. Dr. Evans and his colleagues at St. Jude's Children's Hospital helped to narrow and define the combinations of drugs and doses that are highly effective in treating childhood leukemia. They also developed revolutionary, personalized methods for treating this disease and other childhood cancers. As a result, 5-year survival rates for children with leukemia have soared from 10% to nearly 90%. It is no exaggeration to say that Dr. Evans is the world's most preeminent clinical pharmacy scientist. He has been continuously funded by the National Institutes of Health since 1979, including receiving 3 consecutive merit awards, the NIH's most prestigious award. He is one of only about 10 pharmacists who have been elected to the National Institute of Medicine of the National Academies of Sciences. He is published in the New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, Science, and other prestigious journals. And the influence of his more than 400 original publications has earned him the distinction of being a highly cited scientist for being in the top 1% for citations of papers in his field worldwide. Dr. Evans currently serves as Director and CEO of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, one of the top children's cancer hospitals in the U.S. and the most trusted charity in America. There, he has demonstrated leadership and vision that extends beyond academic clinical pharmacy to the field of medicine as a whole. He is a role model not only for clinical pharmacists and clinical scientists, but also for all medical and biomedical scientists. The University of Florida is proud to recognize Dr. William E. Evans today with the honorary degree of Doctor of Science.
On behalf of the University of Florida, with the unanimous consent of the Faculty Senate and the Board of Trustees, and by the authority vested in me, I hereby confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Science. Congratulations. I would like to recognize Dr. Evans' colleagues and friends who are with us today. Would you all please stand that we can recognize you? Next, we are pleased to recognize a true man of medicine. I ask Provost Glover to present H. James Free for conferral of the honorary degree Doctor of Humane Letters.
Dr. H. James Free experienced great success early in life and then spent his career deepening and broadening that success as a physician noted for his compassion and expertise. Dr. Free was a member of the first graduating class of the University of Florida College of Medicine in 1960. As a young research fellow at UF in the ensuing years, he joined Dr. Robert Cade and several UF colleagues in the invention of Gatorade. He went on to a 30-year career practicing nephrology and internal medicine in Clearwater, earning a widespread reputation for blending technical expertise with humanistic personal care for his patients. Gatorade created the sports drink industry and remains its leader to this day. Equally impressive, Gatorade has helped thousands of athletes avoid sports-related illnesses and injuries, and served as a vital tool in fighting dehydration-related illness in third-world countries. What is more, Gatorade has brought substantial revenues to the University of Florida, helping the university attract star faculty members, equip state-of-the-art laboratories, and fund graduate students and postdoctoral associates. After Dr. Free left UF, he moved to Clearwater and began a long career in private practice affiliated with Morton Plant Hospital. There, he served as chairman of the Department of Medicine, chairman of the Hemodialysis Committee, and president of the medical staff. In the 1980s, he also served on the Morton Plant Hospital Board of Trustees. Although he retired in 1996, Dr. Free has devoted countless hours of volunteer service to the Clearwater Free Clinic, including repairing and restoring antiquated dialysis machines to preserve the clinic's precious resources. The president of the Free Family Foundation, he has also given time and treasure to numerous service organizations. In his accomplishments in his career and in his compassion, Dr. Free represents the highest ideals in the practice of medicine. The University of Florida is proud to recognize Dr. Jim Free today with the honorary degree of Doctor of Humane Letters.
Dr. James Free, on behalf of the University of Florida, with the unanimous consent of the Faculty Senate and the Board of Trustees, and by the authority vested in me, I hereby confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Humane Letters. Congratulations. I would like to ask Dr. Free's family, his wife, and friends and colleagues who are with us today to please stand so that we can recognize you. Now we're pleased to recognize a true man of art. I ask Provost Glover to present Robert Rietti for conferral of the honorary degree Doctor of Arts.
Thank you, President Machen. An actor, director, playwright, translator, writer, and inspired public speaker, Robert Rietti is noteworthy for the remarkable range of his contributions to the arts. Born in England in 1923 of Italian Jewish heritage, Mr. Rietti was a child actor who appeared in more than 22 movies before the age of 10. He was 15 when World War II broke out, and he and his family were placed in a detention camp because of their Italian background. After 8 months, Mr. Rietti was released to organize a British Army unit of professional actors to entertain the troops. When the war ended, he returned to his work on films while also broadening his career to radio, stage, and television. A talented character actor, Mr. Rietti worked alongside such legends as Gregory Peck, Michael Caine, Sean Connery, Tony Curtis, and Shirley MacLaine. He also collaborated with directors such as John Huston and John Schlesinger. Known as the Man of 1,000 Voices for his vocal range, he made important contributions in the field of sound and dialogue, including working with Orson Welles on radio programs. He was a regular on numerous radio series in the 1950s, and he also guest starred on several television shows in the 1960s and 70s. In more recent years, Mr. Rietti has established a reputation as a translator, author, and gifted public speaker. He has translated much of the work of Luigi Pirandello from Italian into English, and he has published 2 collections of stories about the Jewish experience in modern Europe. His lectures on subjects ranging from the art of dubbing to reflections on the city of Jerusalem have won him wide acclaim. In 1988, Mr. Rietti was knighted as King of the Order of Merit of the Italian Republic. In 1990, his knighthood was upgraded to Officer Knight of the Italian Republic. The University of Florida recognizes Mr. Robert Rietti today with the honorary degree of Doctor of Arts.
Mr. Robert Rietti, on behalf of the University of Florida, with the unanimous consent of the Faculty Senate and the Board of Trustees, and by the authority vested in me, I hereby proudly confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Arts. Congratulations. I would also like to recognize Mr. Rietti's friends who are with us today. Would you all please stand so that we can acknowledge you? The University of Florida Graduate School recognizes the contributions of graduate faculty for excellence, innovation, and effectiveness in mentoring and advising doctoral and graduate students with the University Doctoral Dissertation Advisor Mentoring Award. We're fortunate today to have with us two recipients of this award whose commitments to graduate students and their education is vital to the success and the strength of our graduate programs. Will Drs. Konstantin Machev and Peter Sajewski please rise? And will their family and friends please rise so that we can recognize you? This university thrives because of outstanding graduate students who contribute in significant ways to teaching, research, and scholarship. And graduate teaching assistants make a major contribution to teaching and learning here at the University of Florida. Each academic year, the graduate school recognizes the best, brightest, and some of the most industrious of its graduate teaching assistants for their work as instructors in the classroom and in the laboratory. And would all the recipients of the 2011-2012 Graduate Student Teaching Awards please stand so that we can recognize you? The very top recipients of the Graduate Teaching Awards receive the Calvin A. Vanderwerf Award that was established in memory of Dr. Vanderwerf, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences from 1971 to 1978. We're pleased today to have on the platform two recipients of the 2011-2012 award whose commitment to graduate students and their education is exemplary. Will Ms. Rebecca Baumann and Mr. Lamor Suarez Lemo please rise to be recognized? A special point of privilege. Will the family of these two honorees please rise? Ms. Suarez Lemo's family came to see us all the way from Venezuela. The Howard Hughes Medical Institute Science for Life Graduate Student Award also recognizes exceptional graduate students who assist in mentoring undergraduate scholars. Each of these recipients co-authored at least one refereed publication in the life sciences with an undergraduate student. And would the award recipients who are here with us today please rise so that we can recognize you? It is now my great privilege and honor to introduce a woman who has been a pioneer in her native India, a leading envoy for her country, an advocate for a warm and rewarding relationship between India and the United States. Her Excellency Nirupama Rao, the Ambassador of India to the United States. Madam Ambassador Rao's diplomatic career has spanned nearly 4 decades in several world capitals, including Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. As a member of the Indian Forest Service since 1973, she became the first woman to be designated as spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs. She served as India's first woman High Commissioner in Sri Lanka and as India's first woman ambassador to China from 2006 to 2009. When she returned to India from China, she was appointed Foreign Secretary the highest office in the Indian Foreign Service. Madam Ambassador Rao has been ambassador to the United States since 2011. Here at the university, we believe cross-cultural education and collaboration is the very heart of our mission, and we're especially committed to the students, their research and educational activities that we share with the country of India. We have over 1,100 Indian students on campus, a new international education center in India, several University of Florida India study abroad programs, and many other cultural and academic connections. And we understand that India has a growing presence in the lives of all our students, faculty, and especially our graduates. And we couldn't be more pleased to have India's highest representative in the United States here to give our commencement address today. So please give a warm welcome to the Ambassador of India to the United States, Her Excellency.
Mr. President, members of the Board of Trustees, distinguished faculty, the honorary degree recipients, the graduates and their families, and most of all, the mothers and fathers who have got them to this point in their lives. It is not usual for me to deliver a commencement address, and I am deeply honored by this opportunity to address all of you graduates who stand on the threshold of your beautiful tomorrows. I'm aware that the University of Florida is one of the premier seats of learning in the United States, committed to academic excellence, contributing to the socio-economic development of your state, and preparing students like you to be global citizens for an increasingly interconnected world. You are ready to face the challenges of the 21st century with the learning and the knowledge you have acquired within these portals. I'm very happy to learn that more than 1,100 Indian students are currently enrolled at the University of Florida. Through its linkages and its partnership with several Indian academic institutions, the university is performing yeoman service in the promotion of greater understanding between the Indian and the American peoples. For example, only recently, a University of Florida-led research team has been selected to participate in a 5-year, $125 million project on the development of clean energy technologies involving research institutions, universities, and industry from India and the United States. Commencement ceremonies always induce a sense of nostalgia in us older people. On this day, I cannot but help think of my own student days and the world of the early 70s when I stood on the threshold of my tomorrow. At that time, my country, India, was a very young nation, having marked 25 years of its independence, years during which our republic began its journey on the path of economic development and building a just and equitable social order after a dark period of colonial rule and exploitation. We did not live online and did not know what a virtual world meant. You are digital natives. We, of an older generation, are immigrants in a digital world. The universe of the digital and the internet was barely imagined when we were in university. But the world was already shrinking in real time through the radio set, the movies, through newspapers and magazines, which we accessed avidly in our thirst for information. In what was then a small town in India, where I studied for my master's degree in English literature, I was witness to the tragedy of the war in Vietnam, the creation of Bangladesh, the historic visit that President Nixon made to China, and the menacing brinkmanship of the Cold War. The world was certainly becoming much smaller than it had ever been in time past. My grandparents, both maternal and paternal, had spent their entire lives in the southern Indian state of Kerala. My parents and their siblings made India their stage, living outside their home state. It was left to my generation to cross the 7 seas and discover the world. Our dreams created their own cartography, reaching across borders that we saw on maps. We sought enlightenment and we sought empowerment. I became a diplomat at the age of 22 in my very own quest for enlightenment and empowerment. We were attracted to careers in public service. We wanted to make a difference. Women in my country, those of whom had access to the opportunities provided by education and supportive family environments, were therefore beginning to take up careers in public service. I came to the profession of diplomacy because of this desire to make whatever contribution I could to my country's progress and security, because of my curiosity about the world around me, my love of history, both ancient and current, and the manner in which I was impacted while growing up by the spirit of a newly independent India and what she has stood for. I was also inspired by the tradition of women like Gargi, an extraordinary Indian woman sage who was said to have challenged her seniors with disturbing questions on the nature of the soul, or Atman. It was an example that constantly inspired me to challenge any obstacle that confronted me on my journey, both professional and personal, with perseverance and determination. Diplomacy, the field to which I have belonged, was for long the exclusive preserve of men. I'm speaking on behalf of my country, and this was very evident when I became a Foreign Service officer in 1973. The very thought that statecraft, the conduct of relations between sovereign countries, could involve women was new, even up to a few decades ago. Of course, the fact that we had a woman Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, at that time, was a revolutionary development not only for India, but the world. It made our ascent as women much more acceptable to society at large. Years earlier, C.B. Muthamma, the first Indian woman to write the examinations for the civil service and to join the Indian Foreign Service, struggled valiantly to improve the system, and her efforts yielded extraordinary opportunities for those who succeeded her. Today, the Indian Foreign Service can proudly count in its numbers a host of women ambassadors and high commissioners, not to mention all its other women diplomats who represent India abroad and contribute effectively to the making of our foreign policy. Friends, India is today going through a process of historic change. Aspirations are rising, with millions being lifted out of poverty, and our accelerated growth has made us well poised to be one of the leading economies of the world. We have consistently discharged our national and international duties with responsibility. Our democracy is strong, it is vibrant, it is resilient. In the years since I came to be a diplomat, the impact that women have had on public life in India has also grown from strength to strength. For example, I was privileged to head India's Foreign Service as the Foreign Secretary for 2 years from 2009 to 2011. It was a unique experience in every way. It also demonstrated that our system is fair and just, and one of the best in the world when it comes to acknowledging the contribution of women in public service and to the life of the nation. Let me shift gears a little here, away from the personal to a larger context. We live today in an age of innovation. In today's environment of constant change, of greater awareness among citizens and globalization, the ability to adapt and stay innovative is critical. Change is not easy in any society. The convenient way out is to adopt ways that have been in place for countless years. All of you whose education has taught you to ask questions, to seek cogent answers, know that knowledge must constantly multiply and not divide, or become restrictive, cribbed, cabined, and confined. The world is still an inequitable place. The revolution in rising expectations we see across our planet compels us to be even more conscious of the need for social innovation, applying technology to provide solutions for human development, whether it is water for drought-prone areas, higher-yielding agricultural techniques, providing better health solutions, particularly for women and children, or better management of our rapidly growing urban spaces. In the summer of 2010, PepsiCo's Indra Nooyi, addressing a conference of Indian ambassadors, noted that whether, I quote, "you look through the lens of diplomacy or the lens of the corporation, the task is the same, to create a world in which we feel safe, settled, and happy," unquote. In our world of today, prosperity and security reinforce each other. That safety and security comes from economic progress, from innovation and enterprise and technological invention. Today, also as a measure of how the world has changed, borders between nations are becoming increasingly porous, and in time, they will be increasingly irrelevant as people are allowed to move freely to transact trade and commerce and to travel without hindrance. Protectionism in such a situation becomes a hindrance to economic growth and development because it seeks to cap the flow of people, of goods and services, of ideas and technologies. It builds walls and is thus retrogressive. We must be alert to its stifling effect. Globalization integrates the world today in many ways, but it has also unleashed its discontents. There are vast gulfs between those who have a wealth of opportunities and those whose lives are ridden with poverty and marginalization. We who live in the developing world, as in India, are especially conscious of this reality. This is especially because we are a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, pluralistic society. Our challenge is to deliver the benefits of globalization and economic reform and growth to the many millions of people who must be included in and benefit from this growth process. They must have a ticket to ride, and we must do right by them, to borrow what the Beatles said. And to ensure this, we have to grow our economy at an accelerated pace. The unhindered flow of capital and technology across borders is one of the key components of this process. Let me dwell on yet another theme. I know that all of you look to the future with dreams, hope, and anticipation. You are no doubt receiving a lot of advice from your near and dear ones. Let me also weigh in with my thoughts. Many years ago, during India's freedom struggle, the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, said to our young people, quote, "Become the change you want to see," unquote. That was a powerful exhortation, an inspirational clarion call, which continues to ring clear and powerful even today. The Mahatma took his inspiration from the simple and poor people who populate the countryside of many countries in our world. He rightly said that all our actions become meaningful only when we gauge them by a special and simple test. Do they help the poorest and the weakest among us? And he sought to instill profound values in the people around him. For him, there could be no wealth without work, no pleasure without conscience, no knowledge without character, no commerce without morality, no science without humanity, no worship without sacrifice, and no politics without principle. From this, we can deduce relevant inspirations for a youth, or an artist, or a manager, or a politician, or, if I may add, for PhDs, because these principles apply to all of humanity. Gandhi also said, I quote, "Nothing that is violent can be of lasting benefit to mankind," unquote. This is a powerful message for a world racked by sectarian strife, proxy wars, terrorism, and conflict within and between nations. His global vision could be understood by his thought that, and I quote, "Once we recognize the common parent stock from which we are sprung, we realize the basic unity of the human family, and there is no room left for enmity and unhealthy competition," unquote. I think it is most important that we approach any task or challenge or situation with an open mind. The tragedy of a closed mind has no place in democracy. Here again, the words of Gandhi should inspire us. He said, I quote, "I do not want my house to be walled in on all sides and my windows to be stifled. I want all the cultures of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible. But I refuse to be blown off my feet by any," unquote. This cross-pollination of minds, ideas, the freedom of debate, the jousting of ideas, that should be our goal. Let your lives be lived in what has been rightly called the open university of human experience with its rich curriculum. Do not build fortresses, rather dismantle them. There are many around you, less advantaged in the outside world, who crave the safety of the opportunities that have been provided to you. Do not ignore them or the inequality that seems to divide our world. Use your education and your knowledge to provide solutions to these issues. This process is an imperative, and we must not ignore it. Finally, coming, as I do, from India, which is a place where the whole world is seen as an extended family, let me speak of the value we place on relationships and the need to nurture and to treasure them. You will have your careers to fuel your progress in life, but sustenance comes from those relationships of family and friends that help you soar higher and higher. Treasure those relationships. This is an important day in your lives. In years to come, you will remember this as a timeless moment when the whole expanse of life stretched out in front of you beyond the pale of vision. May the education you have received make you the best of human beings, confident, leading by example, followers of the rule of law, good citizens, giving and compassionate. Make the world a better place. Follow the paths of peace and forbearance. I also hope each and every one of you become the builders of an even better and high-yielding partnership between our two democracies, India and the United States. Just as we see many Indian students coming to study in universities in this country, I hope I see many more young Americans drawn to India and the study of India in a serious and comprehensive way. Your great writers like Thoreau, Emerson, and Whitman, among others, blazed an immortal trail in this regard. May you be inspired by their example, because that is the future that beckons. May you be blessed always, and I thank you all.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. As we prepare to confer the degrees today, we're reminded that graduation is a family event, and we would like to give our graduates the opportunity to publicly show their appreciation to all of those who have helped them reach this important milestone in their lives. So will the families and the friends of all the graduates in this class please rise so that we can recognize and thank you. Dean Henry Frierson from the Graduate School will present the candidates for the degrees Doctor of Philosophy, Doctor of Education, and Trustee Juliet Rulak will confer the degree upon the candidates.
Thank you, President Manchin. Will the candidates for the degrees Doctor of Philosophy and Doctor of Education please rise? Trustee Rulak, these candidates, having completed all the requirements for the degrees Doctor of Philosophy and Doctor of Education, and having been recommended by the graduate faculties of their colleges and the graduate school, are presented to you for the conferring of their degrees.
On behalf of the people of the state of Florida, by the powers vested by the UF Board of Trustees, I am pleased to confer upon you the degrees of Doctor of Philosophy and Doctor of Education with the accompanying rights, privileges, and responsibilities. I wholeheartedly offer you my congratulations and commend you on the successful completion of your doctoral degree. You may be seated.
martial signal, will the new Doctors of Philosophy and Doctors of Education please come forward to the platform for formal investiture. The faculty members escorting these doctoral degree graduates are those who have worked most closely with them. It's appropriate to acknowledge the valuable mentoring role that these scholars have played in educating the new graduates.
The College of Agricultural and Life Sciences, Teresa Balzer, Dean.
Dr. Whitney Qualls, escorted by Professor Jonathan Day. Dr. Christopher Stripling, escorted by Professor Grady Roberts. Dr. Catherine Woldham Shoulders, escorted by Professor Brian Myers. Dr. Omar Carrillo Mendoza, escorted by Professor Jose Chaparro. Dr. Dakshina Murthy Kadiyala, escorted by Professor Rao Mailavarapu. Dr. Vivek Kumar, escorted by Professor Doc Seal. Dr. Aaron Collins, escorted by Professor Joseph Larkin. Dr. Neha Rana, escorted by Professor Brent Sellers. Dr. Eduardo Silva, escorted by Professor Catherine Sieving. Dr. Deborah Wojcik, escorted by Professor Martha Monroe. Dr. Carrie Owens, escorted by Professor Nan Yao Su. Dr. Brett Bultemeyer, escorted by Professor William Haller.
The College of Business Administration, Selkirk Aranguk, Associate Dean.
Dr. Mary Steffel, escorted by Professor Robin LeBoeuf. Dr. Thomas Dahlman, escorted by Professor Michael Reiner.
College of Design and Construction and Planning, Paul Zwick, Associate Dean.
Dr. Yang Hong Guo, escorted by Professor Paul Zwick. Dr. Jessica Goldsmith, escorted by Professor Margaret Portillo. Dr. David Goldsmith, escorted by Professor Robert Reese. Dr. Richard Faubert, escorted by Professor Charles Kybert. Dr. Sandeep Srivastava, escorted by Professor Abdul Chini. Dr. Bak Song Boom, escorted by Professor Gary W. Seabine.
The College of Education, Glenn Good, Dean.
Dr. Farouk Day, escorted by Professor Pilar Mendoza. Dr. Francine Euphemia, escorted by Professor Linda Behar Hornstein. Dr. Kathy Hargis, escorted by Professor Linda Behar Hornstein. Dr. Sarah Ann Arthier, escorted by Professor Linda Behar Hornstein. Dr. Melissa Singleton, escorted by Professor Linda Behar Herenstein. Dr. Emma Humphreys, escorted by Professor Elizabeth Washington. Dr. John Denny, escorted by Professor Dale Campbell. Dr. Patricia Jacobs, escorted by Professor Danling Fu. Dr. Cheng Liu, escorted by Professor Danling Fu. Dr. Lisa Sobern Holmes, escorted by Professor Albert Ritzhaupt. Dr. Kisha Sharmel Bryan, escorted by Professor Esther DeYoung. Dr. Jenny Shelby, escorted by Professor David Thoreau. Dr. Danielle Cheprinka, escorted by Professor Craig Wood. Dr. Timothy Brian Ferguson, escorted by Professor Craig Wood. Dr. Luke Stedrak, escorted by Professor Craig Wood.
College of Engineering, Mark Law, Associate Dean.
Jun Wu, escorted by Dr. Tame Lola. Dr. Derek Starkey, escorted by Dr. Spiros Sforanos. Dr. Uttara Kumar, escorted by Professor John K. Schuler. Dr. Alan Neese, escorted by Professor Carl Crane. Dr. Shu Lian Xiao, escorted by Professor Stanley Su. Dr. Brandon Crick, escorted by Professor Gregory Sawyer. Dr. Brian Roberts, escorted by Professor Rick Lind. Dr. Young Jun Park, escorted by Dr. Ralph Ellis. Dr. Xiao Ki Chin, escorted by Professor Prabhat Mishra. Dr. Li Tao, escorted by Professor Xingang Chen. Dr. Tanya Banerjee Mishra, escorted by Professor Shigang Chen. Dr. Panote Chuchai Shri, escorted by Dr. Richard E. Newman. Dr. Yan Yan, escorted by Professor Jen Shan Lin. Dr. Chun Han Lee, escorted by Professor Jen Chan Lin. Dr. Konstantin Kalenchenko, escorted by Professor Srifong Lopang Panich. Dr. Grady Carrick, escorted by Professor Fazil Najafi. Dr. Thomas Griglock, escorted by Professor Manuel Ariola. Dr. Crystal Stevens, escorted by Professor Brandy Omrad. Dr. Aaron Tucker, escorted by Professor Rosalind Sadlier. Dr. Alvaro Mendoza, escorted by Professor Gerhard Fuchs. Dr. Elena Axel, escorted by Professor Jacob Jones. Dr. Anderson Pruitt, escorted by Professor Jacob Jones. Dr. Harpreet Brar, escorted by Dr. Michelle Manuel Myers. Dr. Young Nam An, escorted by Professor Dmitry Kapelovich. Dr. Gregory Ellert, escorted by Professor Henry Sedano. Dr. Ming Chi Yang, escorted by Professor Kevin Powers. Dr. Xiao Chung, escorted by Professor David P. Arnold. Dr. Pan Gu, escorted by Professor Hugh Fan. Dr. Fari Vagafi, escorted by Professor Christopher Badich. Dr. Arslan Munir, escorted by Professor Sanjay Ranka. Dr. Manu Rastogi, escorted by Dr. John G. Harris. Dr. Jing Jing Sun, escorted by Professor John Harris. Dr. Alexander Singh Alvarado, escorted by Professor John G. Harris. Dr. Carolyn Kreckler, escorted by Dr. John Harris and honoring the memory of the late Dr. Clint Slatton. Dr. Nicole Rousey, escorted by Professor Mark Law. Dr. Changhua Liu, escorted by Professor Elliot Douglas. Dr. Song Jun Lee, escorted by Professor Elliot Douglas. Dr. Andrew Stewart, escorted by Professor Elliot Douglas. Dr. Hon Chul Jo, escorted by Dr. John Sensalone. Dr. Meng Hai Wu, escorted by Dr. John Sensalone. Dr. Duck View, escorted by Professor Jian Li. Dr. Hemant P. Rao, escorted by Professor Heis Bozeman. Dr. Yakun Hu, escorted by Professor Heis Bozeman.
College of Fine Arts, Ed Schaefer, Associate Dean.
Dr. Pamela Merrill Brecka, escorted by Professor Elizabeth Ross. Dr. Jung Chul Choi, escorted by Professor Elizabeth Ross. Dr. Gabriel Ferraz, escorted by Professor Silvio dos Santos. Dr. Ling Fung Chan, escorted by Professor Silvio dos Santos. Dr. David Goldblatt, escorted by Professor David Z. Kushner. Dr. Chester Udell, escorted by Professor James Paul Sane.
The College of Health and Human Performance, Steve Dorman, Dean.
Dr. Kostas Karadakis, escorted by Professor Kyriaki Kaplanidou. Dr. Janelle Wells, escorted by Professor Charles S. Williams. Dr. Sarah Senf, escorted by Professor Andrew Judge. Dr. Ashley Smoother, escorted by Professor Scott Powers. Dr. William Nelson, escorted by Professor Scott Powers.
The College of Journalism and Communication, Debbie Treacy, Associate Dean.
Dr. Sun Young Park, escorted by Professor Debbie Treacy. Dr. Hyun Ji Lim, escorted by Professor Juan Carlos Moyeda. Dr. Jinsu Kim, escorted by Professor John Morris. Dr. Miao Guo, escorted by Professor Sylvia Chan Olmsted. Dr. Kirsten Wesner, escorted by Professor Clay Calvert.
The College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Dave Richardson, Senior Associate Dean.
Dr. Meng Meng Chu, escorted by Professor Sishu Chen. Dr. Joshua Tony. Dr. Joshua Tony, escorted by Professor Michael Heckenberger. Dr. Joshua Torres, escorted by Professor Michael Heckenberger and Professor William Keegan. Dr. Joost Moorsink, escorted by Professor William Keegan. Dr. P.O. Saki, escorted by Professor Alan Burns. Dr. Kenneth Kaspersi, escorted by Professor Matthew Jacobs. Dr. Cedric Warman, escorted by Professor Robert Holt. Dr. Frank Bouchard, escorted by Professor Marta Wayne. Dr. Claudia Marika Katrine Savva, escorted by Professor Barbara Manel. Dr. Christian Aillo, escorted by Professor Carol Murphy. Dr. Rex Kruger, escorted by Professor Terry Harpold. Dr. Robert Brewer, escorted by Professor Jennifer A. Rea. Dr. Catherine Dunar, escorted by Professor Robert Wagman. Dr. Olivia Prosper, escorted by Professor Maya Marcheva. Dr. Joseph Brennan, escorted by Professor Alexander Turul. Dr. Penji Sun, escorted by Professor James Kiesling. Dr. Erica Zuer, escorted by Professor James Kiesling. Dr. Marilisa Jimenez, escorted by Professor Kenneth Kidd. Dr. Charles Newsom, escorted by Professor Kenneth Kidd. Dr. Gregory Parent, escorted by Professor Marilyn Swisher. Dr. Rebecca Stortz, escorted by Professor Molea Ghosh. Dr. Wendy Whitman Cobb, escorted by Professor Larry Dodd. Dr. Hans Schmeisser, escorted by Professor Larry Dodd. Dr. Jeffrey Hamill, escorted by Professor Brian Morosky. Dr. Basri Gulbakan, escorted by Professor David Powell. Dr. Sylvia Alvarez-Clare, escorted by Professor Michelle Mack. Dr. Danielle Palo, escorted by Professor Kaoru Kitajima. Dr. Vincent DePaul Medvivi, escorted by Professor Francis Puitz. Dr. Lorraine Clark, escorted by Professor Nicole Alana Horenstein. Dr. Abraham Boateng, escorted by Professor Anna Breitcher-Todt. Dr. Matthew Smith, escorted by Professor Jane Brockman. Dr. Adrian Steyer, escorted by Professor Craig Ossenberg. Dr. Khalsa Al-Aghbari, escorted by Professor Carolyn Wiltshire. Dr. Dongpin Che, escorted by Professor Kirk Shans. Dr. Sebastian Inagaki, escorted by Professor Kirk Shans. Dr. Vivian Siedemann, escorted by Professor Christopher McCarty. Dr. Timothy Modko, escorted by Professor Christopher McCarty. Dr. Kara Phillips, escorted by Professor Timothy Vollmer. Dr. Miguel Gonzalez, escorted by Professor Yunsuk Lee. Dr. Francisco Rojas, escorted by Professor Charles Thorne. Dr. Sean Mitrick, escorted by Professor Guido Mueller. Dr. Ithaskun Sanrahan, escorted by Professor Fred Heyman. Dr. Daniel Capalupo, escorted by Professor Fred Heyman. Dr. Corey Cook, escorted by Professor Catherine Cottrell.
The College of Medicine, Michael Good, Dean.
Dr. Paulette Robinson, escorted by Professor Gregory Schultz. Dr. Cassidy Chauncey, escorted by Professor Frederick Southwick. Dr. Hui Ming Xia, escorted by Professor Edward Scott. Dr. Anitha Shenoy, escorted by Professor Edward Scott. Dr. Juyun Jun, escorted by Professor Mohan Raisada. Dr. Candace Bishel, escorted by Professor Xiaogang Jin. Dr. Dennis Neild, escorted by Professor Xiao Guangjin. Dr. Wei Yi Ni, escorted by Professor Richard Snyder. Dr. Mukund Balasubramanian, escorted by Professor Michael Kilberg. Dr. Suhada Halther, escorted by Professor Mathis Albanja McKenna. Dr. Bala Venkatakrishnan, escorted by Professor Robert McKenna. Dr. Serena Giovinazzi, escorted by Professor Alexander Ishov. Dr. Yaima Lightfoot, escorted by Professor Clayton E. Matthews. Dr. Svetlana Kantarovich, escorted by Professor Paul Carney. Dr. Dustin Williams, escorted by Professor Roger Patke.
The College of Nursing, Jennifer Elder, Associate Dean.
Dr. Laura Smith, escorted by Professor Jennifer Elder. Dr. Craig Cunningham, escorted by Professor Brian Weber.
The College of Pharmacy, William Riffey, Dean.
Dr. Melanie Stanton, escorted by Professor Reginald Fry. Dr. Huang Mo-Tan, escorted by Professor Shihang Song.
The College of Public Health, and Health Professions, Michael Perry, Dean.
Dr. Manuela Corti, escorted by Professor Carolyn Patton. Dr. Pablo Saldana, escorted by Professor Jamie Pomerantz.
The College of Veterinary Medicine, Charles Courtney, Associate Dean.
Dr. Jennifer McGee, escorted by Professor Don Samuelson. Dr. Mark J. Rumpler, escorted by Professor Tom Vickroy. Dr. Noel Takeuchi, escorted by Professor David Barber.
Congratulations again. Let's have another round of applause for all of those receiving the doctoral degree. At this time, Dr. Frierson will present the candidates for the degrees Doctor of Plant Medicine, Doctor of Audiology, and Doctor of Physical Therapy, with Trustee Rulak conferring the actual degree upon the candidates.
Will the candidates for the degrees Doctor of Plant Medicine, Doctor of Audiology, and Doctor of Physical Therapy please rise? Trustee Rulak, these candidates, having completed all the requirements for the degrees Doctor of Plant Medicine, Doctor of Audiology, and Doctor of Physical Therapy, and having been recommended by the graduate faculties of their colleges and the graduate school, are presented to you for the conferring of their degrees.
Thank you. On behalf of the people of the state of Florida, by powers vested by the University of Florida Board of Trustees, I am pleased to confer upon you the degrees of Doctors of Plant Medicine, Doctor of Audiology, and Doctor of Physical Therapy, with the accompanying rights, privileges, and responsibilities. I offer you my heartfelt congratulations and commend you on the successful completion of your doctoral degree. You may be seated.
Now, upon the martial signal, will the new Doctors of Plant Medicine, Audiology, and Physical Therapy please come forward to the platform for investiture. And the faculty members escorting these doctors are the ones who've worked most closely with the graduates. And it's very appropriate to acknowledge the valuable mentoring that these men and women have played in educating this class of scholars.
Well, yes. Yes. The College of Public Health and Health Professions, Michael Perry, Dean.
Dr. Kyle Fosholz Howell. Dr. Lindsay Cockburn. Dr. Stephen Petrakis. Dr. Blair Handy. Dr. Rebecca Markadis. Dr. Jenny Perlas. Dr. Nicole Rose. Dr. Krista Delaney. Dr. Danielle Rosier. Dr. Kevin Still. Dr. Amy Hebert. Dr. Mark Caffrey. Dr. Joanne Wood. Dr. Rose Oma.
The College of Agricultural and Life Sciences, Teresa Balzer, Dean.
Dr. Rafael Vega, escorted by Professor Norm Lepler.
The College of Public Health and Health Professions, Michael Perry, Dean.
Dr. Kurt Roser. Dr. Kevin Ekebis. Dr. Joel Clark Gunn Crandall. Dr. John Timothy Bell II. Dr. Jeffrey Atkins. Slow down, right? Dr. Hayes Estes. Dr. Anthony Vogt. Dr. Alicia Burkhart. Dr. Alicia Mokandance. Dr. Arlene Thobabin. Dr. Jessica Hudson. Dr. Sarah Bass. Dr. Charlotte Bocchino. Dr. Shannon Burton. Dr. Jenna Glusky. Dr. Benjamin Corey Fernandez. Dr. Lindsay Sarbeck. Dr. Leah Cameron Taylor. Dr. Alana Laguerre. Dr. Rachel Schrader. Dr. Catherine Story. Dr. Megan Carney. Dr. Alicia Dusner. Dr. Jennifer Wright. Dr. Jennifer Dorning. Dr. Wendy Wurtzel. Dr. Jessica Blank. Dr. Sarah Rivard. Dr. Karen Pohl. Dr. Kimberly Merker. Dr. Abby Martin. Dr. Karen Kovac. Dr. Jan van den Bogard. Dr. Anna Campbell. Dr. Megan Kettles. Dr. Lauren Dixon Brinton. Dr. Lauren Noe. Dr. Lauren Gornoshki. Dr. Lauren Engelbrecht. Dr. Jason de la Cruz. Dr. Justine Haroun. Dr. Jessica Damelin. Dr. Michelle Burgess. Dr. Samantha Mancino. Dr. Sarah Lynn Slentz. Dr. Laura Catherine Hayes. Dr. Laura Adams. Dr. Marina Orley. Butchered that one. Dr. Morgan Leary. Dr. Robin Hines. Dr. Adrian Vallanilla. Dr. Travis Hamilton. Dr. Michael Jacob Berman. Dr. Carolina Sobodio. And Dr. Michael Rodemaker.
That's it. Very good. Huh?
So once more, let's have a round of applause for the 2012 spring class. We're almost finished now. We're going to rise and sing together your alma mater, and then at the end of the alma mater, there will be a recessional from by the platform party. So please allow us to get by before you start running out of here. Again, I can't tell you how proud I am of you. You are the real reason this university exists, and we're counting on you to go and do great things. So go Gators.
Thank you.